Alright, today we are going to see a video on how to make the pajama pants for our class project. So we have several different patterns, but they're all the same. These are two different ones by New Look, and I think we even have another one, so they'll have different numbers. But they have different things on the pattern that you can make. We're just going to do the pajama pants. Now, the one I'm using today, just to save fabric, this one shows the pajama pants long. I'm actually making like a capri pant pajama, kind of like this, but we're not going to have the tie in the bottom, just to save fabric, just for demonstration purposes. So this is what the different patterns look like. They're basically all the same thing. They have the legs with just either a drawstring or elastic, and we're going to be doing the elastic version. All right, so now we're going to look at the guide sheet. And the guide sheet is going to show you, if you remember when we went over this, it shows you the different pattern pieces, and we're only doing the pants. So you're going to go down to, this one shows we have 45-inch wide fabric and shows you how you're going to lay it out. We're not going to do pockets. So number 7, if you want to know what number 7, you can look up at the guide and it'll tell you it's the pocket. And number 6 and 5, it'll show you here's the pants back and then the pants front. So this shows you how you're supposed to lay it out. And what I usually do is get a highlighter, and because sometimes if I'm laying out things I get kind of confused with everything, and I will take and kind of highlight the one I'm supposed to be looking at so that I don't get confused. Okay, so also notice the way you're supposed to lay this out. We talked about the different ways you can lay out fabric. This one you're going to lay out with the selvages at the top, the fold at the bottom, and the cut edges on each side. So you remember we talked about before, there are different other ways, like this sleeves and neckband they have laid out completely different. And on this shirt, they have, you see the selvages in the middle and the folds on each end, so you can do that. So it's important to look at your layout so you'll know the best way to lay it out. So we're going to use this one, and that's why I highlighted it. So we're going to start with and this is a different pattern, so the numbers are going to be different, but it is the back and then the front. Now the pattern pieces are going to be facing up. If we were to put them facing down, it would show the pattern piece like in a darkened. And that means you would flip it upside down, but that does not show, it shows that these are up, so that's how we're going to do that. So I'm going to lay the guide sheet over to the side, since I kind of have an idea how that's going to go, and we're going to go to our fabric next. Alright, so what we're going to do to start with is, my counter is not quite long enough, so I had to extend over to the stove. You want to fold your fabric. Now remember, your fabric should be pre-washed and dried. That way if it's going to shrink, it's going to shrink before you cut it and sew it, which is really good. Alright, so this fabric, this is just a regular cotton, and you want to fold it so the right sides are together and your selvages are running across the top and your fold is running across the bottom. So you want to make sure, I always put a few pins, not a lot, just a few pins here and there across the top of the selvages, just to hold the selvages so that your fabric will lay flat and you know that it's right. Once I have that, you want to smooth out any, you can iron your fabric if you want to. If it's really wrinkly, you probably want to iron it. So now we're ready to lay out, and I just kind of make sure, you know, this is how it said to lay it out, so I'm going to start with this piece. If you just got a pattern and it hasn't been cut apart yet, you're going to see multiple sizes. This pattern went all the way up to extra large, but this one has already been used and it's already been cut out at a size medium. So we're going to use the medium today. But if this extended up to extra large, what I recommend doing is taking your Sharpie, and let's say if we were going to cut this out extra small, I would highlight that extra small line all the way around so that you're cutting on the right line. When you get up here to the crotch area and some other areas. Sometimes it gets a little confusing with the lines to see where you need to cut. All right, a couple other little things that it shows here. This shows where the crotch line is. There's some people that have really high waist or low waist, and they might be concerned where the crotch line is to make sure it's going to be long enough for them. Also, you remember we talked about the shorten and lengthen line? This is where the shorten and lengthen line is. If you are a really petite, short person, instead of just cutting off the bottom, that would make your leg wide at the bottom. You would cut this and take out however much you want, or if you're tall, you could put in a couple inches in between there, but that is the lengthen and shorten line. Remember, you don't want to do that at the end. You want to do that up here. All right, so remember, we have a couple things we need to pay attention to when we're cutting out. And that, first of all, is the cutting line. We don't want to be cutting on the wrong line. And then when you see a notch, these little triangles, this is a single notch, this is a triple notch. And when we get ready to cut these, remember, we're going to cut those up. If you cut them down, you'll cut into your pants, and that will be bad. All right, so a couple things about your pattern. Remember, we have pattern number. It tells what piece it is, and it tells what pattern it came from. And if you, in the apparel too, if you do your own pattern, you're going to want to put your initials on all the pieces in case they get misplaced. We don't have, we have a problem with that. All right, I'm going to take this fabric and move it down. So you want to be working on a flat surface. I like working on the kitchen counter because it's a nice height. Remember, when you're doing this, you need to be standing up. If you're sitting down, you're at the wrong angle to be doing this. All right, the first thing you're going to look for on your pattern, after you look at the guide sheet and you decide how they're supposed to be laying out, you need to either find the grain line or place on the fold line. Remember, if you have a place on the fold line, it's going to be a little bracket that has an arrow pointing down to the fold, and you would place that on the fold first. Okay, this one has a straight of grain, so that is the most important thing. If you were to cut these pants out and you just flopped it on there and cut it out like that, the fabric is running diagonally, and it's going to pull across your crotch and your backside and be very, very uncomfortable to wear. So it's important that you lay your pattern straight. And in order to do that, you have to use this grain line. So, and in order to do that, you'll need, when you get ready to do this, you need your pin cushion, scissors, and your measuring tape. Okay, so, and I want to make sure here that the fabric is not running over, so I don't want to get way too close to the edge. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of room there. Okay, so I usually start with one end and make it something easy to see. Okay, and I'll move my hand so you can see that. This one is at 9.5 inches from the arrow to the fold. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pin, and you go down and back up right there. That's the first thing you pin. Make sure your pattern is smooth, and we're going to go all the way down to the other end. And so we know it's straight. That is going to have to be 9.5 also, and you see it's not. So I'm going to bring this up a little bit more to 9.5. So I'm right exactly at the same place. Okay, that is so important, the very most important thing. So now I know this arrow is running completely straight. These pants, the fabric is going to be running the same way all the way down, so it's not going to pull across. That's the very first thing you pin. Then you want to just go and pin the different edges. Make sure when you pin, you do not want to have your pin running over the edge, so when you get ready to cut, you would be cutting, you know, the pin off. So we want to stretch this with our hand, pull it, and make sure always pin the crotch up here, so, and like maybe in the curve. The pins do not have to be perpendicular for this. You just want to make sure everything's pinned down and they're not hanging over the edge. So I'm going to pin around. I try to get each corner, and if it's a straight straight edge like that, I just put a pin in there so it makes it easy to go around that. That one's crooked. Okay, so, and again, this is a size medium. This one's already been cut out on, so I'm just going to use that. Okay, we don't have to go crazy with pins, just I try to go to each corner and maybe on a straight edge. All right, now this is kind of different. This one has notches down the bottom. Normally you don't have notches on a edge, but the reason for that is because this one actually has something that's supposed to attach to the bottom, a casing where the string's going for the capris. But we're just going to make these like pajama pants, but capri length. So we're just going to cut across there, and I'm actually not going to cut notches there because I'm not going to add anything on the bottom. All right, so that's actually what you have to do. You're supposed to pin all your pieces before you cut. So I'm going to move this down so that I can get this in now. All right, and that's why I like to pin that selvage first so that my fabric isn't going to move on me. All right, so now this is the pants front. Okay, so I'm going to lay this and try to smooth it out as much as I can. And if you have extra space on your fabric and you really do want the pockets, we'll try to find the pattern, the pocket pieces for you. We could put those on there. But just to simplify things today, we're just going to do the pants. All right, so let's see. This one's at 9. Okay, so it doesn't have to be exactly the same as the other, but if if we wanted to make it 9.5, we could. If you want it to be the same, so we'll do that at 9.5. But as long as the two ends are the same, it doesn't matter. Okay, so let's go down again to the end, and I'm right on 9.5. Wow. Okay. All right, so that's the first thing we pin. Okay. I'm gonna go up and do places there. You see that's going to be part of our casing where we're going to put the drawstring of the elastic through. So that's one thing we're going to mark, and you notice the notches all around. Okay, so I'm going to put a pin there and a notch. Again, I lengthen and shorten line. I'm just going to leave that laying right now. Now, before you get ready to cut, this is where you want to stop and have me check to make sure you have laid it out. Let me measure your grain lines, let me check, and make sure everything is correct before you cut, because if you mess up cutting, it doesn't matter how you sew. There's nothing we can do to fix it. So once we have that, we're not going to need the pins or the highlighter right now. So I'm going to move this back and get my scissors ready, and we're going to cut. Now again, make sure when you're cutting you want a good pair of fabric scissors. Do not use paper scissors. And I'm really picky about the fabric scissors. We don't cut paper with them so they don't get dull. And these are brand new, so they should be sharp. Make sure you're always standing, and when you cut, your arms should be straight out. That's why you don't want to sit down and cut, because it's really hard to get a good angle. All right. So there's no place on the fold. If we had a place on the fold line, we would not be cutting, especially if it was like a shirt and you had to open it up. But we're going to have two pieces, two backs and two fronts. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start. You want to try to cut with as big, I spoke too soon, a big of a cut as you can. And if it bothers you having like this, it's fine if you want to go ahead and just cut up, so that doesn't bother you, if that's fine. And you can take the pins out and across the top once you start. Okay, and just feel free to move it around. All right, we're getting ready to come to a notch, so we're going to stop. You're going to cut up like a horn and down, so you can see how I cut. And it's really important that you cut cut the notches out because that's going to show you where to match one piece to the other. And if you cut out, that won't bother. If you cut in, then it's going to cut into your pattern. So you don't want to do that. Alright, so we're going down the leg right now. Try not to cut into the pattern. And I'm just going to cut that off. I think I'll come up and do this one. Okay, this is the crotch area I'm cutting. If you have a triple knot, you're going to cut up all the way across and down. You don't have to cut them separately. And I'm following the medium line here. And so you would want to follow whichever size you're making. Okay. Cut your notch out. And remember, I'm not going to be cutting these notches because I'm not adding the drawstring at the bottom. So otherwise, I would normally do that. Alright, so there is the pants back cut out, and the front is, and I'm not going to cut that out just for time's sake, but I want you to see I would do that the same way. The only difference is going to be up here on the front. There's several things that are different than the back. The back does not have the marking for the little opening for the elastic and drawstring. It doesn't have those dots. So that's something we'll come back to in just a minute. I'll show you how to take care of that. So let's go back to the back. Once you have your piece, this is something that I've learned to do when I've had multiple pieces. Sometimes I forget what piece I've got. What I want you to do is just turn back your pattern piece and make sure you're using a marking pen. Don't use a Sharpie or a writing pen because that does not come off. Alright, this is disappearing ink and this is Mark Be Gone. There's different ones, and try to pick something that'll kind of stand out. I'd like you to put your initials on your fabric, and I would do it on both pieces on the wrong side. Okay, and then I always put the piece number, or if you're not sure if that's going to be confusing, you can just write back. So, you know, like I said, when I'm sewing and I have multiple pieces, and I take the pattern piece off, sometimes I forget what pattern piece it was. So I just put my initials and what pattern piece it is, and I would do that with each pattern piece you have. All right, so now we have to mark. We've already cut out our notches, so now we have to mark any dots that we have. And so I'm looking all around, and you want to see if there's anything up here that you need to mark. It looks like there's nothing on this one, so let's go to the front piece. And I'm going to pause the tape just for a second and cut this out, and then we'll come back. Alright, we are back, and we have cut out the front the same as we did the back, and we cut out the notches, and so now we're ready to pin or mark the markings on here. The only thing that we need to mark on this pattern is this little opening right here and these two little dots, and you want to do all your marking on the wrong side. So this is how I do that. I put a pin, and there are other ways to do this, but I put a pin through like the, both ends, and then I'm gonna take out this pin. Let me see if I'll move this back so you can see. And I pull it back so you can see where the pin goes in. Then I'm just going to connect those just like it was. And then if you go to the back side, you can see where that was. And then we'll connect those. So that shows where that little opening was. Alright, so then I'm going to come up here and do this little marking. These little dots. So I go through, just pull that up, I'm marking it on the wrong side. Okay. Now, and remember, and the other thing we want to do for each pattern piece, and remember you only have two, is put your initial. Don't do it like near where you have something marked. Put your initials on it, and then put what this is. This is the front piece. All right, so once you have your markings, and we are sharing pattern pieces, we're going to have to take the pins out, and we'll fold up the pattern pieces. So, you know, we don't need the pattern anymore. Once we've cut it out and we've marked everything, then we are done with the pattern. And so then our next step would be to look at the guide sheet and tell us what our first step will be. So we want to make sure you know how to thread your machine, and you remember how to do back stitching and pivoting and all those good things, because you're going to be ready to sew as soon as you get to this point. Okay, so there's my front. I'm going to kind of fold that up just for right now. Move everything, and I just double check as I'm going just to make sure I did mark everything. And this is a good time, you know, to make sure it's going to be the right size and everything, or even before you cut it out, you might want to hold your pattern up to you and see if that's about how long. I know some of you, if you're shorter, if that pattern is way too long, you know, you want to think about shortening that before you cut it out. So we need to check that before you cut. All right, so we're finished with those. All right, so I'm just going to fold these pieces up, and that's a good time. Your initials on them, put them in your tray, and wait till our next step, and that's going to be to start to sew. Okay, hope that helped.